I sat on a hard wooden bench outside the hospital, clutching my hands together until my knuckles turned white. It was a beautiful spring day. The air was warm, and the sweet smell of blooming flowers filled the air. But none of it reached me. My world had shrunk to a single hospital room, and the constant, relentless beeping of medical machines. My husband, Ben, was lying inside, in the intensive care unit, fighting for his life against an enemy we never saw coming. 6 months ago, we had a lifetime. We talked about vacations we couldn't afford yet, a bigger house for the kids we still dreamed of having, maybe even a dog. Then Ben came home one night, pale and exhausted, brushing it off as just a long day at the woodworking shop. But the tiredness lingered, deepened, and soon turned into strange bruises and nights when he couldn't catch his breath. The doctors said words that didn't seem real. Aplastic anemia. His own body was destroying his bone marrow, shutting down the factory that made his blood. Without a stem cell transplant, they said, there was little hope. I tried to be strong for him, holding his hand and whispering, "We'll get through this." But every night I cried alone in the bathroom, my sobs muffled by a towel. I knew something Ben didn't. He had grown up in foster care, never knowing his parents, never even knowing if he had brothers or sisters. And without a close relative, the odds of finding a donor match were almost impossible. We had joined the National Registry, but the doctors were honest. The wait could take months, maybe years, and Ben didn't have that kind of time. The disease was moving too fast. Earlier today, Ben's doctor pulled me aside. His words gutted me. "Anna, we are running out of options. If we don't find a compatible donor soon..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I knew what he meant. I sat on that bench, tears streaming down my cheeks, feeling utterly useless. I was a nurse. I spent my life helping others heal, yet I couldn't heal the man I loved most. I thought about the life we had built together, our small wooden house, the rocking chair he had made me on our first anniversary, a constant reminder of his love. The thought of losing him was unbearable. Deep down, a cold voice whispered that I might have to prepare for it. I hated myself for even thinking it, but grief had already coiled its icy fingers around my heart. I had said my goodbye in my head, a quiet, tearful goodbye. And I was now walking out of the hospital, defeated. Then, as if the world wasn't cruel enough, I overheard something. A casual conversation between 2 hospital employees who were on a break nearby. "You know that guy in the ICU, Ben? He looks just like this guy who lives out in Maple Creek." My heart stopped. Maple Creek. It was a small mountain town a couple hours away. Could it be nothing more than a coincidence? Or could it mean Ben had family out there? Someone who might be a match? For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't dared to feel. Hope. Fragile, trembling hope, but hope nonetheless. I stood frozen in the courtyard, their words echoing in my ears. "He looks just like this guy who lives out in Maple Creek." Maple Creek was a small mountain town about a 2-hour drive from Nashville. I had only been there once before. People resembled each other all the time, but something inside me whispered that this was different. Ben had grown up in foster care, abandoned at birth with no information about his family. He had spent years wondering if there was someone out there with his same piercing blue eyes, his same kind smile, someone who might share his blood. I remembered one summer night when he admitted, Sometimes I think about looking for them, but what if they didn't want me then? Why would they want me now? He had buried that thought, choosing to believe that family was what you built, not what you were born into. But now, family wasn't just an abstract idea. It could be the difference between life and death. That night, I barely slept. I sat at Ben's bedside, holding his hand while the machines hummed softly. His skin was pale, his breathing shallow but steady. I whispered, "I'm going to fix this, Benny. I don't care what it takes." The next morning, I marched into my job and filed for emergency leave. My boss, a good woman, didn't ask many questions. She just hugged me and signed the form. I packed a bag, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and determination. I didn't even know the man's name, only that he lived in Maple Creek and apparently looked like my husband. I had no plan, just a single picture of Ben on my phone and a fragile thread of hope. Before leaving, I went to Ben's room. He was awake, smiling faintly when he saw me. "You look like you're about to take on the world," he teased, his voice weak but warm. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "I might be." He tried to ask more, but I stopped him. "Don't worry about it, okay? Just rest. I'll be back before you know it." I wanted to tell him everything about Maple Creek, about the man who might be his family, but I couldn't risk giving him hope only to break it if it turned out to be nothing. The drive out of Nashville felt surreal. The highway gave way to winding country roads, and eventually, the rolling hills of Maple Creek. As I crossed the old wooden bridge leading into town, I whispered a silent prayer. "Please let this be real. Let there be someone out there who can save him." I parked near a small general store and stepped out, clutching my phone tightly. The people here moved at a different pace. Every face I saw, I studied carefully, searching for some trace of Ben's sharp jawline, his kind eyes. I walked into the general store and approached the clerk, a man in his 50s with kind eyes. "Excuse me," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm looking for someone. I don't know his name, but people say he looks like this." I showed him Ben's photo. His eyes widened immediately. "You're probably talking about Sam Henderson. Lives out by the old cornfields on County Road 6? Yeah, he does look just like that." My heart skipped. Could he really be my husband's brother? "Could you give me directions?" I asked, a fresh wave of hope washing over me. He did, and I thanked him before heading back to my car. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I drove toward what might be the answer to every desperate prayer I'd whispered. I didn't know if this Sam Henderson was actually related to Ben, but I knew one thing for sure. I was about to find out. The road to County Road 6 was a stretch of cracked pavement winding through tall pines and open fields. A soft drizzle began to fall, clinging to my windshield and blurring the edges of the horizon. I slowed as I spotted the mailbox, with faded letters, Henderson. The house behind it was old, weathered, and surrounded by a field of corn stubble and muddy tire tracks. A rusted swing creaked in the wind. For a moment, I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel, my heart pounding in my ears. What if I was wrong? What if I was about to knock on a stranger's door and make a fool of myself? But then I thought of Ben, his frail hand, his smile trying to hide the fear in his eyes, and I stepped out of the car. The wooden steps groaned as I climbed them. I knocked lightly at first, then harder when no one answered. After a moment, the door creaked open. A man stood there, taller than I expected, broad-shouldered but slightly stooped. His eyes. My breath caught. They were the same piercing blue as Ben's, the same shape, the same intensity. He blinked at me. "Can I help you?" His voice was deep, cautious, with a rough edge. I held out my phone with trembling hands, showing him the picture of Ben. This is my husband. His name is Ben Carter. People said you look like him." His frown, staring at the screen for what felt like forever, his expression shifted.
confusion, disbelief, and something almost painful. He rubbed the back of his neck. Well, I'll be damned. He looked at me again, his face softer now. Who are you? Anna. I am his wife. He stepped aside. You'd better come in. Inside the house was humble. Wood floors, mismatched furniture, the faint smell of coffee and motor oil. He gestured to a chair. Sit. You're saying he's your husband. I nodded, clutching my bag in my lap. He's in the hospital. He's very sick. He needs a bone marrow transplant. They said he has no family. But then I heard about you and my voice broke. I had to come. The man, Sam Henderson, sat opposite me, leaning forward. He looked at the photo again, shaking his head slowly. I think he might be my brother. Those words hit me so hard, I almost couldn't breathe. Your brother? Sam nodded. Our mom. She wasn't much of one, to be honest. She had a lot of kids, most with different fathers. When I was little, she had another baby, a boy. She said she wasn't keeping him, signed papers at the hospital and left him there. I was too young to do anything, but I never forgot. Always wondered what happened to him. I didn't even know his name until now. My eyes blurred with tears. Ben's been looking for family his whole life. He thought he was completely alone. Sam's jaw tightened, and he stood abruptly. I'll do it. The transplant. I don't even need to think about it. He's my brother. If there's a chance I can help him live, of course I will. He walked into the kitchen and returned with his truck keys. When do we go? For a second, I just stared at him, stunned by how quickly he'd made the decision. I had imagined convincing him, maybe even begging him. But there was none of that. It was like he had been waiting for this moment, without even knowing it.
We left Maple Creek that evening, the rain now heavier, streaking the windshield as Sam drove behind me in his old pickup truck. My chest felt lighter for the first time in months. There was still fear. There was always fear. But now there was also something else. Hope. Hope that felt solid, like ground under my feet. When we arrived at Vanderbilt University Hospital, I led Sam through the sterile white halls to Ben's room. Ben was awake, propped up by pillows, his skin pale but his eyes brightening when he saw me. Then his eyes shifted to Sam, and they narrowed in confusion. For a long moment, no one said a word. Ben's mouth opened slightly, like he was staring at a ghost. Sam stepped forward, emotion thick in his voice. I think I'm your brother. Ben blinked, tears welling instantly. My brother? I stood there watching two men, strangers just a day ago, brothers by blood, lock eyes as if recognizing something only they could feel. Ben reached out a shaking hand, and Sam took it firmly. We'll talk later, Sam said softly, but right now, I'm here to save your life. Sam's test results came back faster than I expected. The doctors wanted to expedite everything because Ben's condition was getting worse quickly. When the hematologist stepped into the waiting room with a soft, relieved smile, my knees nearly gave out. She's a strong match, she said. One of the best we've seen in a while. I turned to Sam, tears brimming in my eyes. Did you hear that? You're a match. You can save him. Sam's expression wavered between shock and determination. Then, let's do it, he said. When do we start? That night, Daniel and Luke finally had time to sit together. I stayed just outside the doorway for the first few minutes, giving them privacy, but I could still hear their voices. Low, emotional, hesitant at first, then warmer as the minutes passed. Ben's voice broke as he said, I used to dream about having a brother. I thought it was stupid, like dreaming about a house you'll never live in. But here you are, real. Sam chuckled quietly, though his voice was thick. Guess life had other plans, huh?
I'm sorry I wasn't there, Benny. I didn't even know. You don't have to be sorry, Ben said, gripping Sam's hand with surprising strength for someone so weak. You're here now. That's all that matters. When I stepped back into the room, Ben looked at me with damp eyes and whispered, I have a brother, Anna. I'm not alone. I kissed his forehead and smiled, whispering back, You never were. The procedure was scheduled for the next morning. I barely slept, my mind racing through every possible outcome. Sam was calm, even joking with the nurses as they prepped him for the donation. Never thought I'd be giving my bone marrow to a guy I met yesterday, he teased, then looked at Ben and added softly, But I'm glad it's him.
The procedure was scheduled for the next morning. I barely slept that night, my mind racing through every possible outcome, every worst-case scenario I had imagined over the past few months. But Sam was calm. He was even joking with the nurses as they prepped him for the donation. Never thought I'd be giving my bone marrow to a guy I met yesterday, he teased, then looked over at Ben and added softly, But I'm glad it's him. The hours crawled by, but eventually the doctors came out with news. The transplant went smoothly. Ben was moved to a recovery room while the new stem cells began their life-saving work. I sat by his bed, holding his hand, feeling the warmth slowly return to his skin. For the first time in months, his face had a hint of color. I couldn't stop the tears. For months, I had carried so much fear, so much loneliness. But now, sitting there, I felt something I hadn't dared to feel in so long. Peace. Luke, Ben's father, came in later, looking tired but content, and Ben reached out weakly to clasp his brother's arm. You just gave me a second chance, he whispered. Sam smiled and said, Guess we're even now. You gave me family. I had no words. For months, our world had narrowed to a single hospital room, but now it was expanding. Ben had a brother. He wasn't alone anymore, and that was a gift far greater than we had asked for. The days following the transplant felt like stepping into a new world, one where hope finally outweighed fear. Ben's body responded well to the transplant. Each morning, I'd watch for the tiniest signs, a bit more color in his cheeks, a steadier tone to his voice, a stronger grip when he held my hand. Sam stayed nearby, sleeping on an old pull-out chair in the waiting area when the hospital rules didn't allow him to stay in Ben's room overnight. He never complained. One evening, I brought him a cup of coffee and found him staring at Ben through the glass, a look of quiet awe on his face. He's really my brother, he said softly, as if still convincing himself. Ben began to regain his strength slowly, and one crisp autumn afternoon he took his first steps outside since the transplant. I walked beside him as he shuffled carefully along the hospital's garden path, sunlight flickering through the changing leaves. I forgot how good fresh air feels, he whispered, squeezing my hand. A week later, Ben was discharged and we returned to our little wooden house on the edge of Nashville, this time with Sam following in his old pickup truck, a permanent addition to our lives. The house felt different now, fuller somehow, like it had been waiting for this reunion all along. In the weeks that followed, Sam became a regular presence in our lives. He and Ben would sit on the porch in the evenings, sharing childhood memories, the little that Ben had from his foster homes, and Sam filling in the gaps about their mother and the siblings Ben had never met. One evening, Sam handed Ben a small, worn pocket knife with his father's initials carved into the handle. It's all I have left of him, Sam said quietly. I want you to have it. Ben held it with shaking hands, tears slipping silently down his cheeks. The community of Maple Creek also reached out, sending cards and casseroles when they heard what had happened. People I'd never met sent notes like, Family is everything. Hold each other close. It was a reminder that goodness still existed everywhere, even in the hardest seasons. Months passed and Ben grew stronger. His hair began to thicken again, his laugh returned, and he started building furniture in the garage. Slower than before, but with that same spark of creativity he'd always had. One evening,
He pulled me outside to the porch where a brand new rocking chair sat crafted with careful precision. "For you," he said simply. I sat down and felt tears blur my vision as I rocked gently, the chair creaking with a familiar warmth. We also welcomed Sam into our family traditions. Sunday dinners became a staple, filled with laughter and quiet gratitude. Sometimes I'd catch Bud and Sam looking at each other with these half smiles, like they still couldn't quite believe they'd found each other. One particularly golden autumn evening, Ben and I walked along a tree-lined road near Maple Creek, hand in hand, watching leaves swirl in the breeze. Sam was ahead of us, laughing as he carried his young niece, his best friend's daughter, on his shoulders. Ben squeezed my hand gently. "You know, I used to think being an orphan meant I'd always be alone, but I was wrong. I have you, and now I have him too." I looked at him, feeling the truth of those words settle deep in my chest. Family isn't always about blood, Ben, but sometimes it is, and it's beautiful. That night, as we sat around a small bonfire behind Sam's house, the flames casting soft glows on everyone's faces, I felt something I hadn't in so long, a calm certainty that we were going to be okay. Life had broken us down, yes, but it had also put us back together in ways we never expected. It's been a year now since Ben's transplant. He's fully recovered. He's back in his workshop, his hands strong and steady again. He and Sam now run the woodworking shop together, a partnership built not just on blood, but on a shared passion and a bond forged in fire. They're more than just brothers now. They're best friends. Ben and I still haven't been able to have children of our own, but we've started looking into adoption again, this time with a new sense of peace and purpose. We're a family, no matter how we grow it. And as for me, I still work as a nurse, but now when I go to the hospital, I don't feel a sense of dread. I feel a sense of purpose. I help families every day, and I'm reminded that even in life's darkest moments, miracles are waiting in the most unexpected places. I rested my head on Ben's shoulder, listening to Sam telling a story about their childhood neighborhood, and I realized something powerful. Sometimes life gives you exactly what you need just when you're about to lose hope. And for that, I am forever grateful.